Welcome to my channel Coding Clean. Today we are going to look at pointers in C++. So let me write a program to demonstrate this concept. I'm going to declare a variable called counter, and I'm going to assign a value of 10 to this variable. Now a single variable can store a value of its type. So the type of counter is int, and it's storing the integer value 10. Now, in order to store the address of this variable, we need to declare a pointer. So a pointer is a kind of variable which can store the address of another variable. And to declare a pointer, we specify the data type, then put a star next to it, and then name your pointer. We are going to call it PTR. Then the assignment operator, and we are going to assign the address of this variable counter into PTR. For that purpose, we use the address operator. And how do you get that operator? Hold down the shift key and hit 7 on the keyboard. You get this ampersand operator, which is called the address operator. And then type the name of the variable. What this operator does, that it gets the address of counter, and we are assigning that address into PTR. Remember that the type of the variable and the type of the pointer must match. So if you want to store the address of an integer variable, you have to declare an integer pointer. And the star is important. It distinguishes the declaration of a simple variable from pointer declaration. Now let's see the address of counter. So I'm going to say cout, then PTR, and del. Save changes, compile the code, and you're going to see the address. And the addresses are written in hexadecimal form. So this OX normally represent the hexadecimal number system. So this is the memory address of the counter variable, right? Represented in hexadecimal number system. Now, in order to get the value of the address that is stored in the PTR, we are going to dereference the pointer. So dereferencing means get the value that is stored in the address which the PTR is holding. So if we want to get the address, we're going to say cout, then put a star again, name of the pointer, and del. We call this thing dereferencing a pointer, which simply means get the value of the address stored in the pointer. So whatever address is stored in the pointer, we're going to go to the address and get the value back. I'm going to recompile the code, and we're going to run it. And as you can see the value. So that's all about pointers. Now the question is that why do we need pointer? So let's write a program to demonstrate this concept. I'm going to create a function. I'm going to call it swap. And what this function is going to do, it's going to accept two arguments, two integer variables, and we are going to exchange the values of those variables. So let's say we have two integer variables, x and y. We're going to call this function with two variables, and what this function is going to do, it's going to exchange the values. So I'm going to copy the value of x in temp, then I'm going to replace x with y, and then I'm going to assign the value of temp in x. And this is called swapping, right? So let me comment out these lines. And let's create two variables here, int a equals 10 and int b 20. So we have two variables declared inside the main function, and we want to exchange their values. So a is currently holding the value 10 and b is currently holding the value 20. When we call swap and we assign a and b, we expect that the value of a will now be 20 and the value of b will be 10. So let's see if that's the case. A is now just for the message, and then we're going to say a and del. So we are displaying the value of a and b after the function called swap. So I'm going to come here and say b is now, and variable b, save changes. If I compile the code, there are no errors here, so I'm going to run it. A is now a and b is 20. So the values of the variables a and b have not been swapped, not been exchanged. It doesn't work. So the way to make this program work the way we expect, we are going to change these two parameters to pointers, and then we will pass the address of a and b to these parameters and actually change these variables rather than changing the copies of the variables. In this case, we are calling the function swap by values. What does it mean? It simply means that what we are doing here is that we are simply copying the values of A, the copies, remember, not the actual variable, and a copy of B and Y. And we are exchanging the copies, not the content of the actual variable A and B. In order to change the actual variables, we are going to do something like this. We are going to change this to pointers. And now this function expect two addresses, right? And wherever we've used these x and y's, we're going to change them. We're going to dereference them. So we're going to put star next to them. And don't put a star to the temp because temp is not a pointer. And then we are going to pass the addresses. And in order to get the address of a variable, we use the address operator. So I'm going to put ampersand just before A. And I'm going to put ampersand just before B. Now save changes. We compile the code. And let's run it. And as you can see, A is now 20. The initial value of A was 10, but now it's been exchanged. So the value of A is now 20, and the value of B initially was 20, and now it's 10. So sometimes when you want the values of the actual variables to be affected from the calling code, you need to pass the addresses of those variables. And then inside the function, they are going to use pointers because pointers can store addresses. Because when we call this function, what happened is the address of A was assigned to X, and the address of B was assigned to X. And then the content of those actual addresses were exchanged. So these variables A and B have been actually affected and modified. So that's all about pointers. Always remember that a pointer can only store addresses, not values, and a pointer is a kind of variable, but it can store addresses of other variables. And there are lots of situations in C++ where we can only solve that particular problem using pointers. So pointers are a very important concept. Most of the data structures in C++ are implemented using pointers. Thanks for watching. See you next time.